It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach with your host, Sister A. Legree. You can find out more about us by logging on to our website at igbatt.com. Again, you can find out more about us by logging on to our website at igbatt.com, emailing us at igbatt1@aol.com, or support at igbattmho.org. But again, if you go on our website, you can get all of this information where to contact us. Also, just want to remind people and to make sure people understand what we do here. It's about providing information. It's about providing support, encouraging hope and faith, and we take those things very seriously. I think there's some people who didn't realize if you have a question, if you have a concern, no matter where you are, what part of the country, if you have it trying to get resources, you're trying to locate information in your particular area, or you have a question, or you need somebody to kind of walk you through some things, you can kind of reach us. You can call us, or you can email us, and we'll get back to you. And we'll definitely help you find the right resources. If we don't have it, we know people who do. So again, that is something that we do here as well. It's not just this, we also do other things as well. So again, if you or your loved one, you're having challenges finding resources in your particular area, you have a question, you need a second opinion, whatever it is related to mental health issues or faith, you can give us a call or email us preferably. If you call, somebody will get back to you within 48 hours, so this is not an emergency line, but if you call us, we will definitely kind of reach out to help you, okay? So again, what I wanted to talk about today, it's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach. I wanted to talk about 10 things that we need to kind of keep in mind when we're working with individuals or living with individuals who have been impacted by severe and persistent mental illness, okay? I think it's so important, especially as more and more people are becoming more aware about mental health issues. I think that's a good thing. But it's important to keep in mind that when we talk about mental health diagnosis, then we have what we call severe mental illnesses, or severe and persistent illnesses. And those illnesses, such as schizophrenia or bipolar, are illnesses that are so severe that they impact all aspects of an individual's life, okay, to include, all mental illnesses do, but severe and persistent mental illnesses is to even a greater extent, okay? Severe and persistent mental illnesses, even with medications, individuals may never really be free of symptoms, which is why they're severe and persistent. They're chronic illnesses, just like diabetes or hypertension, anything of that nature. So it's important to keep that in mind. So again, some things that are not helpful. I wanted to start off, number one, asking the right question at the wrong time. Asking the right question at the wrong time. For example, and I wrote some notes down here, asking your loved one who is living with a mental illness if they took their medications may be helpful at times, but that same question can be seen as condescending when your loved one is trying to express their point of view or emotions about a situation that they feel passionate about. So what happens is, your loved one is living with the impact of a mental illness, or you yourself may be living with a mental illness, and something happens. And your loved one may become really upset about it, or they want to kind of express their feelings, and we automatically assume that they need to take their medications because they're high strung. Keep in mind, individuals, everyone has a personality. We all have feelings. We're human beings. So that's one of the reasons why we try to say, instead of saying things like, oh, that person is schizophrenic, we don't say that. We say that that's a person who's diagnosed with schizophrenia, right? That's a person who's living with the symptoms of bipolar disorder. So I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind, that we're talking about a person. You're a person. I'm a person. Okay, so we all have feelings. We all have the way we express those feelings. We all have personalities. So just like a person can still be diagnosed with schizophrenia, diagnosed with bipolar, and still have a personality. Okay, it's just that when the symptoms of the illness are not managed properly, the symptoms can kind of I don't want to say it. the symptoms can leave the person just vulnerable to their personality. When many of us, regular, well, I won't say regular people, but many of us, you have a filter, right? You have a filter. You may see someone like with dressed a certain way, and it's terrible. You might well say, oh, like your wife or your husband say, oh, how do I look today? And they may look really bad, but you don't say it, or you know how to say it. When you have a severe and persistent mental illness, sometimes one of the symptoms is that you don't have that filter. That filter tends to decrease, and they blurt out things at the wrong time, or maybe the way they say things probably shouldn't be said the correct way, or whatever the case is. But again, when you're living with someone with a severe and persistent mental illness, remember, asking the right questions at the wrong time. Asking me if I took my medications when you and I are having an argument may not be fair. Asking me if, oh, did you take she need to take her medications. Saying things like that when I'm upset about something is not honest. It's dishonest. It's not a good thing to do, right? Because now you're making it seem like all I am is my illness. All I am is my symptom, and I don't have a right to feel how I feel, okay? So just remember that. Asking the right questions at the wrong time. Blaming the person for the symptoms. The symptoms of mental illness, depending on the disease, can manifest in several ways. So depending on the illness, if it's depression, you might see more of depression. If you see bipolar, you might see mania, or you might see hypomania, right? So it just depends on what the diagnosis is. So the symptoms of mental illness, depending on the disease, can manifest in several ways. Ways that can lead to frustration among family members who don't understand that even with medications and support, some symptoms will still be present. Okay? So there are some symptoms, as I said before, especially when we're talking about severe persistent mental illnesses, that will be present. It's not like the person will go away to the hospital or start taking medications and they'll be totally free of symptoms. The symptoms may be decreased, but they may still be there, and they may flare up, from time to time. One of the things, if you are in America, or maybe not in America, there's this particular individual, Mr. West, people are talking about, and every time I see him, every time I hear something, my prayers hope that someone will do an emergency request for treatment. Because what you're looking at the hypomania, you're looking at the person that's just saying things, there's no filter, right? And then you have people who are taking advantage of that, and I think that's a sad thing. And we're doing that because, a lot of people don't like him, they don't like the things he said, they don't like the things he stood for, they don't like the fact that he's a Democrat, Republican, whatever he is. So many people are allowing their feelings to impact how they treat him. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. People have a right to how they feel. But from someone that's in the mental health field and who's seen this before, I understand that how this is what happens when you're living with someone, or when someone has a poorly treated or untreated persistent illness, especially when you're talking about bipolar. So I'll leave that there. I'll talk about that later. But again, you want to keep in mind that you don't want to blame the person for their symptoms. You don't want to get angry at the person because they're hearing voices, or because they're depressed, or they don't want to get out of bed. You want to, when you find yourself becoming angry as the caretaker, as the loved one, that's an indication that you might need to step back. That's an indication that you might need to step back and center yourself and take a break. Or you may need to talk to some people, because you're becoming angry, you're becoming upset, and you don't want to do that. Being a caretaker is hard. Being a caretaker to someone who is an adult is difficult. Being a caretaker to someone who is an adult, who is living with a severe mental illness, and who does not want to take his or her medications, or who does not want to follow the instructions or the directives of the doctor, can be challenging. Okay, it's hard. One of my partner, she'll say all the time, and my ministry partner, she uses the word endurance. When you're living with someone who has a severe, persistent mental illness, what you have to have is that endurance, right? You need the endurance to deal with the highs and lows, the endurance to know when you need to step back, the endurance to know when you need to reach out to other people. It takes endurance, and endurance for you to take care of yourself. You have to monitor your behavior. You have to eat right. All of these different things, okay? So when we talk about what are some of the symptoms that a person who's living with a persistent mental illness may continue to have. Okay, one of the things that you have to keep in mind, again, depending on the illness, there are going to be some type of cognitive impairments. What does that mean? For some people, impairments in cognition are part of their illness. While the level of impairment will vary with the illness, cognitive impairments can be seen in some diagnoses quickly. What is cognitive impairment? Inability to concentrate, right? You're looking at inability to pay attention, inability to organize or to problem solve quickly, right? So what does this look like? So when you ask your loved one to do something, okay, and they may have a severe and persistent mental illness, it may take them longer to do it. It may seem like it's not registering. They may not really understand what you're saying, or it may take them a while to understand what you're saying. It's important to kind of be patient. Understand that that's part of the illness, okay? Acceptance of diagnosis or medications. Sometimes your loved one may not want to take their medications, but just because a person doesn't want to take their medication doesn't mean that they're a bad person. Just think about it. Many of us don't like taking medications. And for people living with severe and persistent mental illnesses, we're not talking, 1 or 2 medications sometimes. Sometimes we're talking 4 and 5 medications that you're taking more than one time a day. So we're talking about several medications. So understand, it may take a person a while to realize that. If you or your loved one, you're taking more medications than you want to take, then have a conversation with the doctor. Because there are some medications that can be given in a once-a-month shot. So, but again, that can be a problem. Acceptance of diagnosis and medications. Also keep in mind that a person who doesn't accept their illness, or not accepting their illness, or not accepting or wanting to take medications is a symptom of the illness. So it's not like you or I are saying, well, I just don't want to take the medication. When you're living with someone with severe and persistent mental illness, for them, the decision to not take their medication is being clouded by their symptoms. Their symptoms is what not wanting to take the medication is a symptom of their illness, okay? So you don't want to get frustrated and upset. People who say things like, well, he should just take his medication, right? That sounds really simple, but they don't understand that not wanting to take your medication is a symptom of the illness, right? It's not like you or me or someone who doesn't have a severe mental illness who makes the decision not to take their medication. I'm just going to skip it. I don't want to take it today. You're dealing with some individuals who are living with a severe and persistent mental illness who don't want to take their medications, not because they just don't want to. They don't understand at that moment. They don't see a reason. It's a symptom of the illness, okay? One of the symptoms I wanted to share is called negative symptoms. What are negative symptoms? You hear this term when we're talking about schizophrenia. When we talk about schizophrenia, there are two main symptoms. We call positive symptoms and negative symptoms. Negative symptoms, although I try to tell people when I explain it, to think about it like this. Think about positive symptoms or things that are added on, okay? Think about you as an individual, right? And think about your emotions, think about your feelings, about the way you think, right? If things were added on to that would be positive. If things were taken away, it would be negative. So some things that will be taken away would be things like the ability to laugh, the ability to your face. Like if I was talking to you, if you're talking to me, if you see my face, you see the facial expressions that I'm making. When we talk about symptoms of schizophrenia, negative symptoms, the person who have negative symptoms, they may not, their face is real, their emotions are real flat. Okay, you may say something to them. Hey, you won $1 million. Okay, it's real lowered. It's more of a muted. You don't really see. The speech may be slow. You're not seeing a lot of movement. Some people use the term, he's just lazy or she's just lazy, because it looks like that, right? But it can also be negative symptoms, right? Because it looks like the person may just be lazy. Now, they don't want to do anything. They just don't feel like doing anything. And that's not it at all. It's a symptom of their illness. It's what we call negative symptom. They may watch TV for hours, or it's just everything is just real slow. Like the natural emotions that a person without schizophrenia would have, they'd have it, but it's at a lower level, right? You're talking to the individual, and you can't really tell if what you're saying is registering or not because it's so low, and they seem to be moving really slow. But I want you to know that it is registering. On the other hand, when we talk about positive symptoms, you're talking about things like hallucinations, right? You're talking about things like maybe delusions. So those are more positive symptoms. The medications work really well with positive symptoms. They don't always work as well with the negative symptoms that you see. So a person may have those things. Negative symptoms include a reduction in emotions and drive. When we talk about mental illnesses impact our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, right? When we talk about severe and persistent mental illnesses, it's the same thing, but it's even more so. Just to kind of make it a little more, make it plain. So the person might, when we talk about negative symptoms, the person might appear to be apathetic. They look like they're not interested in anything, as I said before. They may not talk much, okay? And you may assume that they're lazy, they're not interested, but don't assume that, because they actually are listening to you, okay? Assuming mental illness is the same thing as a lack of intelligence, and this is number 3. Treating loved ones who are diagnosed with a mental illness like they are stupid or like they are a child is disrespectful. Listen, it's understandable that you will be concerned and your support is needed and welcome, but your level of involvement should vary depending on the need of your loved one. And I wrote this for this reason. When a person first has a mental health crisis, they may need a lot of support, but as time goes on, you should be backing off. You should be not always wanting to do everything for your particular loved one, right? Because they have an illness. They have an illness that can be managed with medications and the right support. So you don't need to do everything for them. You should not be trying to treat your loved one like a child. You should be allowing them to make decisions. You shouldn't be, when you go to a doctor's appointment, you shouldn't be doing all the talking. And you should not allow, health professionals sometimes will do this. They don't talk to the patient. They'll talk to the person who's with the patient only. And that shouldn't be the case. You want to talk to the patient. The patient is there, right? So as a loved one, you want to keep that in mind. Just because a person has a mental illness does not mean they're stupid. Doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. It doesn't mean that they're a child. They just have a mental illness. You wouldn't treat someone who has diabetes or someone who had a heart attack like they were a child, right? So you shouldn't do it if you have a person who's living with a mental illness. They just have a diagnosis and illness where thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are impaired for that moment, right? With the right treatment and the right support, changes, you can start seeing a change in their particular behavior. So keep that in mind. Assuming that you know what it's like to live with symptoms of a mental illness. You do not know, okay? Don't assume that you know what is helpful. Ask questions. Don't assume that you are an expert on living with a mental illness or that everyone is the same, okay? You may be, say, diagnosed with bipolar, and you may be able, as a result of taking your medications, as a result of support, you may never have had a situation where a manic episode where you spent all of your money, right? So just because someone else is doing it, you shouldn't say things, well, I have bipolar and I didn't do that. But there are a lot of different symptoms, okay? People are different. Personalities are different, okay? So you can't do that. And also, if you look at someone and say, oh, that mental illness wouldn't make him do that. Oh, I hear voices, I don't act like that. Well, that's you, okay? Keep in mind, there are several symptoms. Everyone doesn't have all of the symptoms. You may have, if there are 20 symptoms, you may have 4 of the symptoms. This person may have 5. This person may have 15 of the symptoms. This person may have 1 or 2 of the symptoms. So we all vary, okay? We can't choose. We shouldn't be choosing who we support and who we choose not to support, if I can say that, based on our own personal feelings. So again, don't assume you know what it's like to live with the symptoms of a mental illness because you don't know. Even if you are diagnosed with the same thing that I'm diagnosed with, you still are not me. So keep that in mind, okay? Giving bad advice about medication or hospital stays. Don't discourage the use of medications or hospital visits if needed. Don't discourage prayer. Don't discourage reaching out to other people. All of these things are helpful depending on where the person is in their illness and depending on the needs of the individual. There are various strategies. There's no one way to deal with one particular problem. There are a lot of different strategies. Don't, disregard the individual because of that particular strategy. You don't like that particular strategy. Oh, prayer, they shouldn't do prayer, they should just go to therapy. You can do both. And for some people, prayer may work only. And then for other people, they need therapy and prayer. And then some people, therapy may work only, right? So you don't want to discourage the two. Whatever strategy is working for you, then you need to work that particular strategy, okay? And not discourage. I'm not going to discourage you from praying if prayer is working for you. I'm not going to discourage you from going to therapy if therapy is working for you. You may say, well, yeah, well, I need both. Well, you do both, okay? This person over here doesn't need both. Don't get so, high and mighty and feel like everybody has to do it the way you're doing it. You need prayer and therapy, then that's what you do. You do prayer and therapy. If you need prayer, therapy, and medication, then you do prayer, therapy, and medication. If you don't need medications and medications are not working for you and you can manage with prayer, then that works, okay? So again, let's not make this harder than it needs to be or shame people because they're not doing it the way you feel they should do it. Oh, one of the things, because I've been doing this, been in mental health for a while now, and I've seen like the trends kind of go back and forth with certain things. And one of the things, the scripture, the Bible talks about how knowledge puffs up. And there's so many people now who are now coming in, everybody's encouraging people to go to therapy. And I've been doing that, and I think that's a good thing because that's how we get paid, right? It's a job, it's a business. So of course I want you to go to therapy. I think it's a good thing. I don't necessarily do individual therapy. I do it for certain people, but I think it's a good thing. Okay, but I'm looking at how people coming into therapy thinking that this is some kind of magic bullet. Therapy is not a magic bullet. Neither is Bible a magic bullet. Neither is prayer. All of these things are going to require you to put forth some work. So if you're not going to work, it doesn't really matter kind of really what you do. You're going to get the same results, right? But again, I've noticed that some people are now encouraged, some pastors are doing this, preachers, which is great, encouraging people to go to therapy, and they're not encouraging people to go to prayer meeting. You can do both. I'm telling you, as somebody that's been doing this for a long time and has been a believer in Jesus Christ and being led of the Holy Spirit for a long time, you can do both. The problem many times is that we are not going deep enough. We're not going deep enough in either. We're not going deep enough. We're not adhering deep enough to the principles of therapy, and we're not adhering deep enough to the principles of the Word of God, and so we're not getting good results from either area. So anyway, I'm gonna leave that alone. Understand the impact of the illness. Living with a mental illness is difficult. Depending on the illness, the symptoms can be episodic or continual. So again, there are some diagnoses that you'll have. A person, you may have one period in your life where you become really depressed or really anxious. You may have one situation in your life where you're triggered and you start having symptoms. You either get medications, which everybody doesn't need. You go to therapy, everyone doesn't need. You go to peer support, everyone doesn't need. You get support from prayer from your church, which everyone should do, but everyone may not work for everyone. Whatever you use, and you're fine. So some people are fine. And then there are some people who may need ongoing therapy forever, right? They may feel like they need ongoing therapy forever. There are some people who may feel like they need ongoing support forever. There are some people who may have symptoms of their illness is ongoing. And then there are some people who only go to therapy for a short period of time. Okay, I can tell you that the best types of therapy are very limited therapy. It should only be 6, 8, 12 weeks. And then if you need to do more, okay, that's fine. But it shouldn't be, we try to get away from people coming to therapy forever. Because then we need to take a look at what's going on. There's usually something else there. But for many people, it's just a short period of time. It's just a short window. You get what you need, right? And then you stop, and then you live your life and you do other things. But yeah, so that happens with that. But whatever it is, okay, just know that for people who are, and I have to watch what I say here. And those of you who are new to me, to this channel, keep in mind, one of the things that we do here, I have 4 main audiences that I talk to, right? 4 main people that I'm talking to, and sometimes you're like, what is she doing? She's all over the place. It's because I'm trying to talk to 4 main people at the same time. I'm talking to people who are living with a severe and persistent mental illness. I'm talking to their loved ones as well. I'm talking to my colleagues, and I'm trying to kind of share some information. I'm talking to people who never don't know what it's like to live with a severe and persistent mental illness. I'm talking to people who are people of faith as well. So I have like a lot of different people I'm talking to. So that's why sometimes the long pauses. So I'm gonna have to kind of be careful what I say here. But don't underestimate the impact of an illness. Okay. Sometimes an individual may have 1 episode. Some people may have several episodes, and it may be chronic, right? When I'm talking about severe and persistent mental illnesses, which tend not to be, it's not a one time and it goes away. It's a long period of time. It's something that you live with. Just like diabetes or hypertension. Once you get those diagnoses, unless you really, eat right, follow doctor's instructions, many people, once they start taking medications for hypertension, they take it forever, right? Or they may take diabetes, they take it forever, It's the same thing when you're looking at a severe and persistent mental illness. You're talking about you have an illness that needs to be managed. And as you manage your illness, you may have highs and lows, right? When you look at Kanye West, you see the highs and lows. You see the you don't necessarily see manic behavior, but you see the hypomanic behavior and some of the things that go along with it. And if those of you who don't believe me, you can look at his face and you can see something that's going on there. But anyway, so just keep that in mind. Let me stick to my script here. Understand the impact of the illness. Living with a mental illness is difficult. Depending on the illness, the symptoms can be episodic or continual. So even when you or your loved one is doing well, don't get complacent. Don't get complacent. Everyone, to include family members, should have a relapse plan and be prepared for changes. Being diagnosed with a mental illness changes your life. It can impact how well you do in school, work, or get along with people. Changes or relapse, if that occurs, is not the end of the world. Just like periodic fluctuations in the life of a person with a diabetes, changes in symptoms are to be expected. Okay? So don't underestimate the impact of the illness. If you're diagnosed with a severe persistent mental illness, just know that you may have another episode. Just know that your loved one may have another episode. And if they do, that's okay, because we're talking about something that needs to be managed. And I'm going to talk more about that on another broadcast. Okay? Trying to dictate the pace. People move at different paces, so please be patient. For example, 2 people can be diagnosed with schizophrenia, but function differently. 2 people can be diagnosed with depression and function differently. Depending on what age a person is, when they were first diagnosed, the medications and support they received or are receiving now, their journey of recovery will be different. It's going to be different. Assuming that because people don't talk about mental illness in the same way that you do, that they are backwards or ignorant or they don't care. And this really irritates me, especially around Mental Health Month. One of the things I hear all the time, people like to say, more people who educated or intellectual like to say things like, these people, they just don't care about mental health. Black people, they just don't care about mental health. And I cringe every time I say that, because I'm like, what? No, that's not true. The black people you know don't care about mental health, or the people you don't know, you know don't care about mental health. Number one, I don't like that because black people are no different from anybody else. Everybody deals with stigma. It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, straight, gay, everybody deals with stigma. So to single black people out, I don't personally like that, but that's what people do. And then number two, it's not true. It's not true. Because black people do care. But instead of focusing on black, white, or who don't care, look at it like this. If you are dealing with trying to meet your basic needs, okay, what we have more of a race issue, to me, in my opinion, is more of a poverty issue. When you are focused more, whatever color you are, whatever race, whatever, if you are concerned about how you're going to eat, about your job, I was just talking to somebody just last week. You know, everybody's making a big deal about Twitter. You know, all these people losing their jobs to Twitter, blah, 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 blah. These people are getting millions of dollars in severance plan. So I'm not that, you know, broken up about these people losing their job. But I was talking to this one lady. She works at a plant. They went in, it was a week before Thanksgiving. They're not going to get a job. They found out that Friday was going to be their last day. They're not getting a severance plan. Many people are being fired or laid off from jobs. They're not getting severance plans. They're not even being able to keep insurances. They're just being told you don't have a job. These are people who are trying to do selling blood or selling plasma so they can eat. Okay? So when you're talking about people who are living in these types of conditions, you don't know where your next meal is coming from. You know, you got issues with the court cases. You're dealing with physical abuse. You're dealing with sexual abuse. No, mental health may not, seeing a therapist is not going to be at the top of your food chain, right? The top of your priority. What's at the top of your priority is how you're going to survive. So it's not that people don't care, it's that people may be distracted doing other things. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. So again, this has been It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach. Just wanted to kind of share some things with you. It's been a minute since we've actually been live doing this, but I just wanted to share some things with you. Some things just to kind of think about, okay? Just to think about whether you're living with a mental illness or you're the person who are caring for someone with a mental illness. Again, log on to igbattmho.org where you can get more information.